Hi, I'm Nancy Tucker. I'm a certified dog behavior consultant and trainer, and I specialize in treating canine anxiety and aggression issues. I know how hard it can be when your beloved pet is suffering from anxiety, stress, and fear. Separation anxiety falls into that category of emotional stress, and it can lead to problematic behaviors, sometimes even physical harm to your dog in extreme cases. But the good news is there are solutions. And here we'll be discussing the causes of separation anxiety, the signs to look out for, and most importantly, the initial steps that you can take to start helping your dog overcome his fear. With the right approach and some patience and understanding, you can help your dog feel more relaxed and more comfortable when you're not around. So, whether you're a first-time dog owner who's been struggling with separation-related problem behaviors, or you're a seasoned trainer who's hitting some roadblocks with this issue with your clients, this video should provide you with practical and effective strategies to help prepare your dog to overcome their anxiety and feel more at ease. I'll answer a few of the most common questions that I've come across over the years about how to deal with separation anxiety. Dogs who suffer from this type of issue have a really hard time staying home alone. I'm sure this isn't news to you. You've probably noticed that your dog is showing signs of worry if it looks like you're getting ready to leave, or worse, you've already limited the amount of time that you spend outside your home to prevent the problem behaviors from happening, and that's stressful for you. Because of this, you might be wondering if you'll ever have a normal life where you can come and go as you need without worrying about what's happening with your dog back at home. So, what can you do about it? Well, first you should know that you're not alone in dealing with this type of problem. It's actually a far more common problem than you might think. I've been through it myself over the years with 2 dogs who experienced distress when they were left home alone, including my current dog, Bennigan. My first personal experience with this issue many years ago was with my beloved dog, Woody, a German Shepherd mix that we had adopted from a shelter when he was about a year old. We discovered right away that Woody had a serious problem with being left home alone. The first time that we tried to leave the house without him, he hurled his body against the window just to try to get out and follow us. It was awful, and it was incredibly heartbreaking. I obviously couldn't let him hurt himself by crashing through the glass, but confining him somewhere made him panic even more, and I felt really stuck. None of my friends and family understood what we were going through, and I was often advised to just return him to the shelter. Well, I didn't do that. I was a novice trainer at the time, and our situation prompted me to dive deeper into the world of dog behavior in order to find a solution. And I learned so much about the science of dog behavior, and we eventually did resolve the issue successfully. And over the years, I've seen a lot of advice being spread about how to handle this type of problem, and while some of the advice is really good, some is also pretty bad and just plain wrong. So it's not always easy to just do an internet search for solutions, because you'll probably come across a ton of conflicting information. It can be very confusing when all you want to do is get your life back and make your dog feel better. So let's look at some of the most common questions that come up about this type of behavior problem. And the answers that I'll give you should help steer you in the right path toward a solution. You ready? Here we go. Number 1. What did I do to cause my dog's separation anxiety? I'll tell you what you did. Absolutely nothing. I want to make sure that you hear this. Nothing you did or didn't do caused your dog to be this way. You didn't spoil him or baby her. There might have been some past event in your dog's life that may have been traumatic or that served as an important source of stress. But most importantly here, there may be a genetic component at play. Some dogs are just more naturally prone to developing separation-related problem behaviors. Could you have prevented it? Maybe, But don't worry, it's not too late. The way to prevent it is exactly the same method used to treat it once it's already developed. It's a matter of teaching your dog to feel safe and comfortable when he's alone. So, just to make sure that you understand this, because there's often a lot of guilt associated with this type of problem. You didn't cause this. You didn't spoil your dog. And in fact, providing your dog with lots of security and companionship has likely helped, not hindered. There may be a genetic component, and it's not too late to address the problem. That means interacting less lovingly with your dog won't fix anything, and it's not necessary. Feel free to continue being warm and caring and attentive to your dog. Number 2. I've been told I should just let him freak out until he eventually calms down. Will this work? Probably not. In all my years working through this problem with dog owners like you, I have never, ever seen this approach result in creating a calm dog. In fact, it can make things worse. Now, granted, there are some dogs who experience a lot of stress only during the first few minutes after the owner leaves, and then they're able to remain calm until their human returns. But this is the exception, not the norm. Most people try a wait-and-see approach when they first discover that there's a potential problem leaving their dog home alone, and it doesn't usually take long before they come to the conclusion that it's not getting any better. And let's face it, if you're watching this right now, it's because what you've tried so far hasn't worked. It's time to take a more structured, systematic approach that has been tested and proven to work. Number 3. I hear there are indestructible crates that I can use to stop my dog from breaking out. Are these any good? Well, let's talk about that. If he's bending metal crate bars or chewing his way through plastic to escape it, the crate has to go. Dogs who do this aren't being stubborn, and I assure you they are not enjoying being destructive. They're in a state of panic, and they'll do anything, even hurt themselves, to escape where they are. Can you teach a dog to like his crate? Sure. Many dogs learn to truly love being in a crate for short periods. Is using a crate absolutely necessary to deal with separation anxiety? Nope. And in fact, many dogs who experience distress when left alone don't do well with that level of confinement. Some dogs experience claustrophobia, just like humans can. Being confined can trigger a state of panic. There are other ways that you can keep your dog safe and your home intact without resorting to using a crate that your dog clearly does not like. But here's some more information about crates, seeing as we brought it up. You may have heard or read somewhere that a crate is like a dog's natural den environment, a place that allows him to feel safe. And this leads us to believe that providing our dogs with an enclosed environment will stir innate feelings of safety and security. And when we look at it this way, it sure seems like the right thing to do, right? Well, in reality, there's often some confusion about what a den actually is. In feral dog communities, a den is a location away from the usual resting places. It's where females birth and care for their puppies. Dogs don't live in dens on a regular basis. The den serves its purpose, and then in late puppyhood, the puppies begin wandering out to explore. Adolescent and adult feral dogs don't live in dens. But regardless of whether or not you believe dogs live in dens, consider this. Even those animals that are den animals are never actually confined to the den. They don't get locked in like they do in a crate. Right? They can exit whenever they choose. So confinement to a crate with a closed door should be temporary and for the least amount of time possible. When it comes to crates, the absolute best approach is to work with the dog in front of you and determine if your dog is comfortable being confined to a crate or not. And many dogs who tend to show anxious behaviors when they're crated actually do a whole lot better when they're not confined. In other words, being left home alone isn't the problem. Confinement is. They're able to relax if they're left loose in the home. But I realize, though, that leaving a dog loose in the house isn't always an option for various reasons. Some dogs might still experience anxiety, even though they're no longer confined, and others, while they might no longer feel anxious, might get into all kinds of shenanigans if they're given free access to everything in the home, especially if they're young. It's also not always possible if there are multiple dogs or other family pets like cats who need to be separated when left alone for safety. This is where we need to get creative about the use of barriers such as baby gates or doors or even some crafty homemade solutions. Now, before we move on to the next common question, let's spend a little more time here looking at some prep work that you can do to increase the odds that any home alone training you do will succeed. So, if you're not using a crate, how else can you safely confine your dog to an area of your home? Deciding where your dog will hang out during your absence depends on two things: the layout of your home and where your dog feels comfortable. Personally, I like to give priority to where the dog feels comfortable. Most people tend to choose a location in the home that's most convenient for them. And then they'll work really hard to try to help their dog learn to like that area or to feel comfortable in it. I prefer a different approach. Instead of choosing a location that's most convenient for me, I like to begin by identifying the dog's favorite spots. Where does he feel most comfortable? Where does he like to hang out and nap? That is the most important factor in deciding where your dog should be taught to hang out when they're alone. And then with some creativity and some brainstorming, you can make just about any location work, whether it's a room or a large open space that you might need to block off somehow. The important part is to identify that space where your dog feels most relaxed and work with that. But what if the spot that your dog prefers just isn't ideal as a home alone spot? What if you want to use an entirely different space? Well, if you're thinking about using a space in your home where your dog has never hung out before, or maybe a room or a section of your home that they don't really know, start by building a positive association with that location. This is an important part of the process. If you try to practice leaving your dog somewhere where he's not comfortable, he's probably going to do everything in his power to get out of there. So if you plan to use a space that your dog isn't or doesn't already recognize as a safe location, begin feeding your dogs his meals there, completely unconfined with no barriers or closed doors. Spend some quiet time there with your dog. Let him work on a food toy or chew on a bone or nap while you sit close by and work on your laptop or read a book or engage in whatever quiet activity you want. In order for a new space to become a familiar space where your dog will be able to relax, you'll need to make sure that a lot of time is spent there creating this positive association. And this won't happen overnight or even in a week. It's going to take some time. That's just how the natural process works, and it can't be rushed. In the Dogs Home Alone online course, I show you how I set up an entire dining room as a safe space for my own dog, who was and still is terribly claustrophobic, and he couldn't be in a small space like a crate without panicking, but who still needed to be confined because he was just too young at the time to be given access to the entire home. So his home alone area needed to be enclosed for his safety, and at the same time, I needed to help him develop a sense of security in this space through practice sessions. The goal was to help him feel like this setup, this enclosed room, was perfectly normal. And with repetition, it became a safe and familiar environment and context, and then I was able to use that space to practice leaving him home alone. Now, making sure that things feel normal, safe, and familiar when your dog is left alone involves more than just a prime location. You'll want to pay attention to the overall ambiance too. And consider this. When you leave your home, does it create a stark contrast to when you were there just moments before? Does the level of noise and activity generated by your presence suddenly drop to nothing? For example, think about what a typical morning scene might sound like in your home. There might be clanking dishes and cutlery, running tap water, cupboard doors and drawers opening and closing, footsteps, floor creaks, door latches, TV or radio commercials, conversations, including your one-way chatting to your dog, right? We all do that. And then suddenly, when everyone is gone, all that's left is silence. Well, common advice is to leave the TV on for your dog. But before you consider doing something like that, first ask yourself what the normal sounds of activity are when you're home. For example, would the TV actually be on if you were home? And if not, if you're only turning it on when you leave, then that's actually a pretty big contrast to your presence. It's not really imitating the true sounds of when you're home, so it might not be helping much. Creating a soothing or comforting ambiance for your dog while he's home alone has less to do with trying to create what we think is a relaxing setting, like in the case of leaving classical music, for example, and more to do with retaining a sense of normalcy within his environment. And of course, classical music can be soothing for your dog, so don't rule it out entirely, but try to notice what types of sounds are normal in your dog's home environment. Can you safely leave some of those sounds behind when you step out? Some appliances shouldn't be operating when we're not home, like the washing machine or the dryer. But how about the radio? Is there usually a ceiling fan spinning and whirring when you're home? And if the TV is usually on when you're home, then by all means, go ahead and leave it on. Be mindful, however, of sounds that might upset or excite your dog, like doorbells or dogs barking during commercials. Maybe a movie or a streaming channel or a continuous source of music without commercials might be best in this case. Be mindful of the volume, though. Dogs' ears are more sensitive than ours, and a low volume will do just fine. It doesn't need to be blaring. For dogs who might be stressed by outside noises, any sound or white noise that you can leave inside your home will help to buffer the outside noises, and they can prevent your dog from becoming frightened or excited. You can buy an inexpensive white noise machine online that can be really effective. Or you can find apps that stream these types of noises and let it play on a computer or a tablet while you're out. And personally, I prefer brown noise. It's a frequency that's less high-pitched than white noise, which I find a bit irritating. But brown noise has also been shown to do a better job at buffering outside noises. The last element to consider when setting up the home alone environment depends on whether or not your dog is a window patroller. People are often under the impression that their dog needs to be able to gaze outside when he's alone so that he doesn't get bored. Well, there are dogs who are able to just casually look outside and remain calm, but dogs who are prone to feeling stressed or anxious tend to do more than just enjoy the view. These dogs might feel a sense of obligation to patrol what's happening outside the window. They stay vigilant the entire time that you're gone. And that takes a lot of mental energy, and it can create far more stress than you think. If this is your dog, I recommend obstructing their view to the outside. Consider installing frosted window film that allows daylight to stream in but blurs the view to outside. Get the non-adhesive type that you can easily remove whenever you like without damaging the window or being left with sticky residue on the glass. It's very easy to install with some soapy water in a spray bottle and an item with a hard edge like a bank card. The dog you see lying peacefully on the rug is my late dog Chili, who was a stressed out patroller until I installed window film, and then she was finally able to relax. This would never have been possible if she could still see outside. You can see the film is on the narrow glass panes on each side of the door, as well as on the bottom half of the window, above the couch there on the left. If you have a dog who likes to hang out next to a window and gaze out, do a few tests by blocking their view to see if they really enjoy it or if they're actually calmer if they can't see what's happening out there. You might be surprised to learn that your dog is relieved to finally be retired from window patrol. They might actually sleep if they can't see outside. So take the time to thoughtfully set up your dog's home alone space. That'll maximize his ability to relax when he's home alone. It plays a pretty important role, so you'll want to give it a lot of attention. Now, let's get back to the common questions. Number 4. How long should it take for me to fix this problem? Yes, this is probably the most common question. The thing is, separation anxiety isn't experienced the same way by every dog or every owner. This problem is a very personal one, and your particular circumstances are unique. Remember that. The way to resolve the issue is to teach your dog how to feel safe and to be comfortable while alone. And this is achieved through a systematic approach called desensitization. It's basically exposure therapy, but done in a very controlled way. That means that you start easy, gradually increasing the amount of time that your dog is left home alone. And all the while, your dog is learning new skills. And as with any learning, you need to progress at the learner's pace. And in this case, that means at your dog's pace, as well as your own, because you're learning new skills too. It's important that you resist rushing through the process. Pushing forward before your dog is ready won't work, and it can backfire. The goal of moving forward systematically isn't to get through it quickly, although I can see how attractive that idea can be. Instead, you should aim for measurable progress. And how does that work? Well, one day you'll notice that you're able to leave your dog alone for 5 minutes longer than you could before. And you keep practicing until you notice that you can now leave him for 8 minutes more, 10 minutes more, 15 minutes more. And if that doesn't sound like much to you, consider this. In the beginning, most people can't even be out of their dog's sight. Their dog follows them everywhere. But after some practice, the dog is able to be in another room, physically separated from his person for 10 minutes, and he's perfectly fine hanging out by himself. And hey, guess what? That's progress. In fact, that's huge progress. This is exactly the type of behavior change that we're looking for. This is a clear sign that you're doing things right. As long as you keep aiming for measurable progress, you'll get there. And taking note of these small successes is what will keep you feeling optimistic and motivated to keep going. Number 5, do I have to give my dog drugs? Well, no, you don't have to. But hang on a minute. Medication can be a massive help. I'm not a vet, so I can't advise on whether or not medication is ideal for your dog or what kinds of medication or how much of it. But medication designed to treat anxious behaviors in dogs has been around for a very long time, and it's safe and effective. Some classes of medication, like SSRIs, can actually help the learning process. They can reduce or eliminate the panic and the distress and the elevated stress that your dog experiences, and that's a very good thing. Dogs, just like us, need to feel safe in order to be able to learn. Keep in mind, though, that these meds are meant to be used in conjunction with a behavior modification program. Sometimes people see such an improvement in their dog's behavior that they just give them the medication without working on the actual problem that got them in the vet's office for meds in the first place. It's incredibly tempting to do that, of course, but eventually, when you stop the medication, the old behavior comes back. So if you choose to include medication, make sure that you do the work too. It'll be worth it in the end. Number 6, how can I be sure it's separation anxiety and not something else? Great question. Not all dogs labeled with separation anxiety actually have separation anxiety. Some dogs are fine even if they're left in the company of strangers, just as long as they're not alone. And then there are others who are anxious in the absence of a particular person or people, despite being left in the company of other known and trusted humans. They might be hyper-attached to one or more family members. Some dogs just don't like being confined, as we've already discussed, and some might experience more frustration than fear when they're separated from their humans. I've heard owners call this FOMO, or fear of missing out. But what I most often see as a professional are dogs who experience some level of distress when they're isolated, when they're alone and away from others. No big surprise there. Dogs are social animals, and they aren't really built to be alone. They need to learn how to be okay with that. Most dogs learn this without any problems as they grow up, but some really struggle with it, and that's when we start to see the problem behaviors. There are several signs that your dog experiences some form of distress when left alone, and for many of you, only the signs that leave evidence are the ones that you're aware of. You might see things like chewed objects, or soiled crates or floors, puddles of saliva, often mistaken for pee, wet fur from anxious drooling, or scratched walls and doors. All these things let you know that something is wrong. Or maybe your neighbors have told you about the barking and howling that takes place when you're gone. Some signs are much more subtle, though, like ignoring food and water while they're alone, or curling up in a corner and not moving for a very long time. These are less dramatic symptoms, but they by no means indicate that the dog is experiencing any less distress than the dog who is showing much more sensational behaviors. Different dogs exhibit different behaviors, even when they're experiencing some really strong emotions. Number 7, what's the very first thing that I should do? Actually, this one's really easy. Often when there's a problem behavior, you'll find that a need isn't being met. And that's true for any living being, including us. Ask any parent what their kids are like after several days of bad weather when they've been confined indoors with little to do. Their behavior will indicate loud and clear that a need isn't being met. So, here's a quick list of your dog's basic needs. How's your dog's health? Sometimes an undetected illness can cause a dog to behave more anxiously. If your dog hasn't had a full checkup in a while, it certainly couldn't hurt to have one done. Let your vet know that your dog's behavior has changed recently. Is your dog eating a quality food? I'm not a nutritionist, and I can't recommend one type of feeding regimen over another, but I can say this much. It makes sense that an animal, just like a human, would feel better when they eat well. If your dog is eating low-quality ingredients, is it possible he's not feeling his best? Well, look at it this way. If I eat boxed macaroni and cheese every day for all of my meals, will I be sustained? Yeah, I'm sure I can survive on it. Many people do with far less than that. Will I feel good physically? Probably not. Will my mood, mental health, and behavior be affected? I would suspect yes, absolutely. How about exercise? It's normal for dogs to spend a lot of time sleeping, so don't worry about your dog being bored while you're at work. As long as you take the time over the course of the day to ensure that they get at least 30 minutes of physical activity, whether through a good sniffy walk, that's when you let your dog explore with his nose, or through play, either with you or with other dogs, if this is something that he enjoys. Your dog probably needs far more than 30 minutes of exercise over the course of the day, but hey, if he's not getting that now and you manage to increase his activity by at least 30 minutes, you're doing great. And by the way, walking on a short leash at a human's walking pace is not exercise. If there isn't a space available to you where your dog can legally and safely be off leash to run around, at least use a long leash so that he can dart around and zigzag from smell to smell like a dog naturally would. That can make a huge difference in your dog's overall behavior and well-being. Also, give your dog the opportunity to use his brain to problem solve at least once a day. Think of how boring it would be to sit in silence and stare at a blank wall all day. Eventually, your emotional and mental health would decline, and your behavior would reflect that. Try feeding your dog by using interactive food toys instead of a bowl, or engage in a good sniffy game of find it for food or toys. Do some basic training for just a few minutes each day. Teach him some tricks. Burning mental energy for just a few minutes is just as tiring as doing physical exercise. Think of how tired you feel after doing your taxes all day or troubleshooting a technical problem with your computer for a few hours. That stuff's exhausting. There are tons of options and ideas out there for mental stimulation for your dog. Do an online search for dog enrichment, and you're bound to find lots of great stuff. Exercise and mental stimulation won't cure separation anxiety, but it can help reduce stress and create a deeper sense of well-being, which will definitely help your progress. And meeting each of these needs can sometimes resolve a simple behavior problem altogether without needing any training at all. People are often surprised to see just how much it can change things for the better. So, what if after all of that, the problem still persists? Well, look at it this way. If it turns out that your dog is healthy and you're now making sure that his physical needs are met, it'll be easier for him to reach a relaxed state of mind. If he also gets the chance to problem solve and to learn new things, you'll have improved his quality of life and emotional health even more. It may sound pretty basic, but meeting these needs actually plays a vital role in preparing your dog to tackle the ultimate stress test, which is being home alone. Another important thing to keep in mind is that routine plays a very important role in a dog's sense of security and well-being. As long as things stay the same, then all is right with the world. Sudden change in a dog's routine or his environment can often lead to elevated stress and some unusual behaviors that often go hand in hand with that elevated stress. Things like a change in a family member's work schedule, or someone moves in, or someone moves out, or maybe a move to a new home, or sometimes something as simple as moving the furniture around can really disrupt a dog's sense of security. And then we can start to see changes in our dog's behavior, like he might be more clingy, or his appetite goes off. He's not as interested in play, or he's not sleeping well and he's restless, or he might act fearfully towards things that never bothered him before, like noisy plastic bags or men with sunglasses. So, knowing that a change in routine can cause these types of emotional responses, it's a good idea to try to introduce any such changes in a gradual way whenever possible. To understand how a disruption in routine can affect dogs, let's consider what we saw a lot of during important benchmarks of the COVID pandemic. Now, not every dog experiences a dramatic reaction to change, Most dogs are very resilient and they'll adapt just fine, especially if you help them through any transitions. But it's important to recognize that every dog did experience a disruption in their routine when many dog owners headed back to the office after being home for months, no matter what the dog's behavioral history was. For example, puppies who were born during the pandemic grew up not knowing any other type of schedule. Their humans were almost always home with them. Older dogs who were adopted into a new home during the pandemic, maybe from a shelter, only knew this type of life in this new home. This was their new normal. Their humans were present all day long. And even dogs who were used to being home alone before the pandemic had to adapt to it all over again because they got used to a new routine over an extended period of time while their human was home with them. And actually, we saw a lot of new aggression cases at the start of the pandemic because some dogs were feeling very stressed about the constant noise and activity in the home when what they were used to was peace and quiet when everyone was at work or school. So again, routine plays a very important role in a dog's life. And knowing this can come in really handy when you're addressing separation anxiety. So in the end, if you notice that your dog is struggling and they're showing signs of stress when they're left alone, then consider taking important steps to work directly on the problem, like through the Dogs Home Alone online course, which is an affordable self-guided course that you can do at your own pace with easy-to-follow steps from start to finish. Or if you want to work with someone directly, by contacting a professional who specializes in separation anxiety cases. And hopefully this video has helped to answer some important questions that you might have had about separation anxiety. And you've got a better understanding of what might be causing your dog's behavior. You should also now have some helpful information about how you can lay the foundation for a healthy start to addressing your dog's separation anxiety so that you have a better chance at succeeding to help him overcome it. Separation anxiety can feel like a huge problem. But the good news is that there are absolutely ways to resolve it. Reach out to a professional for help or give it a go yourself with the self-guided course. Thanks for watching and good luck.